We are so glad that you could join us. My name is Mary Christensen. I am a marketing director on the CFO LC team. I would like to take a moment to recognize and thank our sponsors, without whom we could not bring you the amazing programs that we put together. It is because of our incredible sponsor partners, such as CGMA, that we can share extraordinary content and thought leadership with our members and our guests. I'd like to encourage you to take a moment to check out the exhibitor booths. Our sponsors are leaders in their industries. They know how to solve problems and create opportunities. Our online platform will be open all day today and through next week. And don't forget, when you are there, you can scroll down to the bottom of the page and easily find a form to connect with any of our sponsor partners. And also, there are prizes available for those participants who are most active. So get on over to that exhibit hall, check out what they've got going on, and you may find an opportunity waiting for you. If you would like to raise your profile with the CFO Leadership Council by sponsoring or becoming a member, please reach out to us. We would love to help you with that. And now I would like to introduce to you the moderator for today's session, creating and leading today's digital finance team. Please help me welcome Bary Payne, Director, External Relations at the Association of International Certified Professional Accountants. Thank you, Bary.
Well, thank you very much for that warm welcome, Mary. Good morning, good afternoon, or to people in my neck of the woods, a very good evening. You know, this is a subject, Jason, I'm really passionate about, and it's fantastic that we're able to have this time with the audience today on creating and leading today's digital finance team. And I have the pleasure of working with you over the next 40 or so minutes. And what I'm hoping that the audience will get is some critical learnings, some actual items, and some stories from you as to things that you've learned along the way. So good morning to you, Jason.
Thank you, and good evening to you, Bary. It's a pleasure to be here.
You bet, no problems at all. Now, I've got a whole bunch of things I'd love to explore with you today, but we know that there's loads of people out there from lots of different places that also may want to ask your insights. So very, very happy to take questions along the way where I can. If you just use that Q&A bar at the bottom of your screens, just put in any questions you like, and let's see if I can ask a few of them along the way. But maybe, Jason, let's first of all start off about your career to date. Now, as I understand it, you've been at Robinhood for about 2 years now, having worked at Amazon for 20 years. Speak to us about how you used your time at Amazon to prepare yourself for the role of the CFO.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I started off as an accountant, and hearing your background, it sounds like you also come from the accounting field. I spent about 5 years at Deloitte & Touche, which was just a great foundation, I think, for being a finance leader. I joined Amazon, and I get a lot of credit for having picked such an amazing company, particularly with hindsight. But some people who really cared about me at the time thought I was a bit crazy going to this small online bookseller on this relatively new channel known as the internet. You know, I joined the company in an accounting role, and what I find, particularly with hindsight, is that an environment that just has, you know, massive growth creates just an amazing amount of opportunity. And I found myself with about 5.5 years of practical work experience in the corporate controller chair at a high growth publicly traded company. Something I wouldn't necessarily advise to the viewers out there, but it was an amazing opportunity for me. And I spent the next 6 years really learning how to be a leader, making lots of mistakes along the way, and really setting myself up, I think, with a great foundation to eventually be a CFO. About 6 years in at Amazon, I had a conversation with a mentor who asked me, what's your plan, and what are you doing with your career? And I kind of sheepishly admitted that I was just going the direction that I was on, as opposed to really stepping back and thinking about it. And he encouraged me to write down my kind of longer term objectives. And when I did that, it made me realize that wanting to be qualified to be a CFO at a Fortune 500 company was more in line with my long-term ambitions versus staying on the path towards Chief Accounting Officer. And so I went and met with a few additional mentors, including the CFO at Amazon, and expressed my interest to broaden my skill set. And that sent me on a really an amazing journey over the next 15 years or so at Amazon, where I had roles in a variety of the finance areas that are really critical experiences for an eventual CFO. I had time in investor relations. I led the audit and compliance function, which is actually a great learning ground for being a good CFO. I had a strategic role in a group called benchmarking that obsesses about customers but pays really close attention to competitors. I was a divisional CFO, and ultimately by the time I left, I was chief of staff to the CFO at Amazon and was leading 5 of his teams. So really all in, just truly blessed to have kind of grown up and learned my skills in an environment like Amazon, where super high growth and really clear frameworks for how decisions are made, primarily being customer obsessed and having a focus on operational excellence. So just can't say enough about my time at Amazon and the people that I worked with, and feel really fortunate to have spent 20 years with Amazon.
And the fact that you're able to take a step back and think so strategically about your own career, given what we perceive to be the fast and frenetic pace of a company like Amazon, that's awesome.
Yeah, lots of observations along the way. One of them is when I left Deloitte, I had a number of people telling me it was a terrible idea to make this change. It turned out to probably be the best move of my career. But likewise, when I moved out of the controller chair, I had many people telling me, as I was leaving a team that had about 100 people on it, I was reporting to a senior vice president at the time. I left that role to be an individual contributor in investor relations, and really friends, family, co-workers, everyone came forward with their best advice, which was, this is a terrible idea for you to move into an individual contributor role. But for me, taking that long-term view, which really Amazon is known for, made a lot of sense from a career planning perspective. And I knew that 5 years from now, 10 years from now, it wasn't going to matter how many people reported to me or who I reported to. It was the practical experience I was going to get. And I've really used that framework, I guess, in terms of what roles to take, each step of the way in my career.
And just one thing that, shouldn't surprise me, but, leaving a Big Four role to join a small online bookseller. Oh, goodness me. It's been a while since we've heard that from Amazon. But listen, you're at Robinhood now. So tell us a bit about this. Tell us a bit about Robinhood and what made you join.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would say, going back 2 years, and as I was making the decision to join Robinhood, it was the people that really hooked me in and got me really excited about joining the company, particularly each of the founders. There was so much familiar in my conversations with these founders. And by familiar, I mean attributes that I recognized as things that I really respected and gravitated towards at Amazon were present in the conversations that I had with these founders. They're obsessed about customers. They want to innovate and they want to shake up paradigms. They think big and they have amazing ambition. And it was infectious, and I was really excited. And I thought that there was, some aspects of the experiences that I had at Amazon that would really help these founders on their way, to accomplish their mission. The company itself, I mean, I can't say enough about the mission. We want to democratize finance for everyone. And, as a father of 3 kids, it's on my mind. How do I instill kind of long-term positive habits around finance so that they'll be, better off than their parents and their grandparents, and I want that for their generation. And I think that really speaks to the mission of the company. The vision is vast. We want to be the single money app for our customers. And it's really early. There's so much to do. We've had tremendous early traction in these first several years, but there's so much more to build and deliver so that we accomplish our mission. So, I think that there's a massive opportunity with Robinhood, and I'm more excited today than the day I joined.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Very infectious. And I know that chat bar agrees with you. Fabiana, on the Q&A there, just want to acknowledge your question about RPA. We will no doubt get to, RPA and other things like that in a few moments' time. But I just wanted to acknowledge that you asked that question of Jason. So let's talk about finance. Let's talk about finance at Robinhood. Let's talk about your philosophy of finance. So I know this is kind of a simple question, but I'm going to ask it you anyway. What do you think the role of finance is, and what's your view on, or how do you know, I guess, on how finance is adding value in its simplest form?
I'll talk about kind of the components of finance, but to get to the heart of, finance adding value, I learned this at Amazon. Look, you're adding value qualitatively when your business partners in important meetings are looking around the room saying, where's my finance partner? If you get to that point where you've earned that kind of trust, where your general managers and business leaders are seeking out the input of the finance partner, then you know that you're there. There's so much more, though, to finance. I would say the foundation and kind of table stakes of finance is really around being the controller of the business. That's, setting up the infrastructure around reporting and metrics. It's understanding your business at a fine grain to know when there's risk and that there needs to be additional controls put in place. And then as you move off of the table stakes, it gets into areas about, encouraging long-term thinking, focusing on economics, not accounting, to make your good decisions, and really not just being the team that says, slow down, we shouldn't spend this much, but being a real advocate for planting seeds of opportunity and doubling down investments when we see that we're moving in the right direction. So, and I think when you take those kinds of perspectives and really incorporate them into the way that the finance function works, then you end up with business partners seeking you out, because they don't look at you as somebody who is more administrative. They look at you as somebody who can be a real advocate for investing in the business and making improvements in the business that will deliver value over time.
So maybe let's just, before we move on, just push at that point a bit. So why don't you give everyone on the line maybe a feel for when you or a member of your team was last sought out, and what that actually looked like for you in terms of someone seeking you out? And I guess you weren't behind a spreadsheet at the time.
Certainly not. I don't want to get into too many details about our business, but I'll tell you a bit of a story on our subscription service, Robinhood Gold. In the first weeks at Robinhood, I was invited to a meeting, and I think people around the table didn't really know what to expect from the new CFO and this person who came from Amazon. And we were talking about Robinhood Gold, which has a variety of features that are appealing to our customers. And it was a subscription service that had multiple tiers of pricing, depending on what level of additional service that you wanted. In that meeting, I advocated for lowering the price to a single tier, $5, which was substantially lower than the price that many of our customers were paying. And I argued that while in the short term, lowering the price would certainly show up in our financial statements, that over the long term, it's great for customers. And if we can align with customers by giving them just an amazing value for a low price, that we'll see lots of positive effects to our business over time. And that moment, I think, sent a clear signal to the business that finance was willing to think long term, put customers first, be willing to make an investment that has some uncertainty in terms of how it may play out. And also, I think that there are moments like this that are great learning opportunities for the organization, and helps get us all kind of on the same wavelength of thinking on how we make decisions. And that kind of a moment sends a signal that, finance is welcome in the room. They're not just going to, keep a tally of the score or say no to investment ideas, but actually advocate for investing in the business.
And talking about decisions, when we had a chat a couple of weeks ago, you mentioned the concept of scaling as a leader. And I really want you to share that with the audience. Scaling with a fast growing company such as Amazon and now Robinhood, I'm sure is something that everyone out there would like to hear more about. Can you share with us what you mean by scaling a finance team in the industries and the companies that you've worked with?
Absolutely. Most of what I learned about scaling an organization, I learned by making the wrong decisions when I was in the corporate controller chair at Amazon. I started in that role, had a team of about 15, grew the team to about 100 in that period of time. And we went from about $1 billion in revenue to about 10 billion in revenue. So just massive growth, not just for the team, but for the company, going from, a seller of books to a seller of many different products, going from a US business to a global business during this time. And there were a number of lessons that I learned, like I said, by being slow to use these lessons for my benefit. The biggest one, which is somewhat obvious, but not always to a younger or newer leader, is to hire big. In fact, even hire uncomfortably big. You should hire people that are smarter than you, particularly in certain aspects that you might be weak. You should hire people that are stronger than you in some of your strength areas. And if you have, big leaders reporting to you and you encourage them to hire big leaders, what happens over time is that the organization can function without you being in the room. And so I would really encourage, particularly in high growth situations, to hire bigger than you think you need, because a year from now, you'll be so glad that you did. The other aspect that I would point out around being able to scale is that you want your team to be representing you and making good decisions, even when you're not in the room. And there's a couple of things that I would point out that one I think is probably more obvious than the other. The first is to set really ambitious goals and let these strong leaders run towards those goals. So you align on the goals, but you really step back a bit and don't overshadow your team and encourage autonomy with some check-ins. The other thing that I learned at Amazon was that your team should have some guiding principles. At Amazon, they call them tenets. And these tenets are really the how of how you want the team to operate. It embraces things like how we should work together and treat each other, how we should be open to diverse thinking, how we should be debating to get to the right answer rather than seeking out social cohesion, just getting to a yes in the room by going through the path of least resistance. These tenets can really help get everybody moving in the same direction as a team. And again, when you're not in the room, you want the team to be moving in the direction that you as a leader wants for the team. And to scale, you just can't be the smartest person on your team all the time, and you can't be in the room all the time. And so you have to hire big and point people in the right direction and let them run. And of course, you have to have check-ins along the way. You should dive deep periodically, to make sure that decisions that are being made or the analysis that's being done is meeting the high standards that you've set. But ultimately, it's a bit counterintuitive. To scale, you need to release your grip and let others really shine and grow.
And that's about your team, Jason. But if you reflect on you, what does it mean to you in terms of scaling, perhaps as Jason Warnick, a leader at the company?
Yeah, certainly. I think first of all, just as context, my time at Amazon, I started when there were about 3,000 employees. When I left, we were just about to cross 1 million employees. My original team had 15. The team when I left had a little over 500. And so, being able to scale individually as a leader, to me, is a lot of the things that I just said about hiring big leaders, but it's getting to where you get the foundation in place, the processes and the people. And then ultimately the biggest value, particularly at Robinhood, once I put the teams in place, my biggest value ultimately will be how successful am I and influencing the strategic direction of the company. And if I'm, knee deep in closing the books or, the ins and outs of investor relations, or you pick it, treasury, et cetera, then I won't be present with the founders when the important decisions are being made. So really scaling individually as a leader is putting, investing in your teams and in the people so that you can be present on the really strategic moments of the company that will ultimately determine, how valuable we are as a company over time. And hopefully, if I'm doing my job, how good the customer experience is being a customer of Robinhood as well. Because as my friends at Robinhood know, I'm certainly passionate about our customer experience.
Now, talking about the customer experience and biting at some of the nuggets that we want to go through in this conversation today, let's move from the context to talking about digitization. And Fabiana, I still have your question in mind, so don't you worry. So when you started at Robinhood as a CFO, how did you go about thinking about your priorities and your approach for delivering them, especially with perhaps how you thought about using digitization initiatives for the company?
Yeah, absolutely. So Robinhood is a U.S. Brokerage, and with big ambitions. But for those of in the audience that are familiar with Amazon, Amazon's not in the financial services business. And so really, as I started, I took this role. I did so with confidence because Amazon had really stretched its brand over the 20 years. And I'd learned that, the principles of finance and decision-making can be applied really to any industry that you're in. But my initial focus was to learn this business. It's complicated, it's highly regulated, it's consumer facing. And this one in particular, is well known. There's a lot of, there's bright lights on our company. And so I needed to learn the business really quickly. The team I inherited was strong, but very, very small. As I said, I came from leading a team of over 500 people, and I took over a team of 9 people, all accountants, and we had 1 contractor in the finance org. This was 2 years ago. And so by necessity, I needed to immediately start putting into play, the things that I was talking about earlier. It's not just scaling, but just building from the ground up. I needed to hire strong leaders for each of the disciplines across finance and give them the flexibility to build their teams and build processes. And so that was kind of like right out of the gate, my highest priority, to learn the business and begin to build the finance org. The other thing, and I would say it was more something that I learned, on the job at Robinhood. I never worked in treasury, for example, at Amazon, although I'd been exposed to it. But really digging into understanding the working capital needs of the business. What are the shock scenarios of our business that could put any kind of pressure on cash? And that was an area that I spent a fair amount of time digging into and making sure that we understand the ins and outs of cash movement. And then the other aspects I would say that I spent some time was just learning to acclimate to the culture. While there were many things that are incredibly similar to Amazon, I was sensitive to coming in and trying to make the Amazon culture the Robinhood culture, because ultimately, if you try to do that, you fail. And so trying to pick my moments where I engage in a way that works with the culture at the company, and begin to influence people. In terms of digitization, really blessed at Robinhood that early on our founders invested in a data science team. So we've got an incredibly robust team that's centralized, that really manages all the data at the company, and publishes dashboards. And really within an hour, I can have standing up dashboards to help me understand pretty nuanced aspects of our business. In terms of digitizing or using automation for finance, what I tend to do there is give the teams some pretty ambitious goals, things that you just can't accomplish just by throwing people at the problem. You have to really throw technology at the problem. So setting the expectation for daily visibility of our trends, setting tough deadlines to be able to close our books. These are the kinds of things that lead to the decision to use technology to enable the business. And so it's really through tough goals that leads the leaders on the finance team to seek out the best software and the best technology solutions, to move the finance team forward.
Yeah, and I want to talk to you about how you prepare people to deliver on the execution goals, which I think you're partly answering. But I've got this really great question from the Q&A that I want to kind of reflect on from Kristen, actually. I think a lot of people are fascinated in this concept, Jason, of hiring big, because many companies, I'm sure the audience feels this, you've got tightly defined positions, you've got tightly defined comp levels, you've got job specs that are tightly defined. So how do you break through that kind of limited thinking in order to hire big?
I think you're kind of describing it right, that you have to break free of that perspective. You know, if you have a team that is really constrained, then what I would encourage you to do is try to round up as much as possible in the roles that you hire for. If you have a little bit less constraint, you know, I would tend to hire above the pay grade of what perhaps you've historically used. One of the criteria that we used at Amazon for promoting someone to vice president was, have they hired people that could take their job? And that's the kind of mentality that you have to have if you want to be able to stand ready to kind of accomplish big things as a company. If you are limiting how big you hire and the thinking around how big you hire, you're ultimately going to limit you know, the potential of the company, because you won't be ready to take on the big stretch opportunities. So I recognize that there's some practical challenges, you know, to influencing those that might you know, have opposing views about what the finance budget should be, or how big you should hire. I've been incredibly fortunate at Robinhood to have quite a bit of autonomy to build the organization that I need to build, so that ultimately we can be an incredibly responsible, publicly traded company. And so I haven't had to kind of fight those fights. And at Amazon, you know, operational excellence, you know, paying attention to every penny, but it had a culture of investing in people, rotating into new roles, and so you always kind of need to have someone standing ready to step up into their next big opportunity. And you know, I think it may take a little bit of time to influence the decision makers around you, but I would encourage you to find your voice and make the case that this is ultimately great for the company and will position us to accomplish even bigger things over time.
And a key part of that obviously is developing people. And I want to talk to you about that in a second. But if we go back to the digitization journey at Robinhood, and build on what you said a few moments ago about preparing people to be in a position where they can hopefully execute on those big goals and find technological solutions to do so. Talk to us a bit more about how you prepare your team to execute on those digitization goals at Robinhood, and you know, any advice for the audience as to how you've approached that.
Yeah, I mean, I would clarify one point, that I've never thought of digitization as a direct goal or a direct objective in itself. Instead, you know, digitization, or, you know, using technology and software, is a bit of a path to achieving, you know, big goals. You know, and so, you know, for example, if I tell my controller that when we're public, I want to be able to file our 10Q on the evening of our earnings release. That's, you know, much faster than kind of the minimum expectation for filing a Q. But that kind of an objective will cause the controller to think outside the box and say, okay, well, what do I need to do in order to move that fast? I need you know, technology solutions that allow collaboration real time. You know, Google Docs is like one example of that, where multiple people can be in a single doc at the same time. You know, when I was the controller, we'd have one version of a Word doc, and we'd kind of pass it, you know, to one reviewer, to the next, you know, bring it back. It was just very slow. Today, there's a number of collaboration tools that allow us to move faster and in tandem. And so it really comes back to setting the really aggressive goals, and then letting them go find out, where are the roadblocks? Where can I not solve this problem just by asking the team to work harder or do more? And on the work harder point, I also talk to my team a lot about work-life balance, because I don't want to achieve these aggressive goals by burning people out or asking them to be superhuman. It can work in the short term when emergency things come up, but it's not a winning long-term strategy. And so it's really technology and just asking a lot of your team to do it. And one of the things that I would say, particularly, I noticed this at Amazon. It's less relevant because we've got such a strong data science team at Robinhood, but the finance team would be hiring data engineers onto the team and teaching SQL, and finance people would be learning, okay, what database holds this data or that data? How do I write the SQL query to pull the data? And so you learn the skills, and you often will learn the skills by hiring someone that has the skill, and then teaching. And I think that finance teams need to step out of maybe the more constrained view of the world and learn some SQL and learn where the data is, and start to pull data yourself rather than having it served to you in a monthly report.
Oh, I can't agree with you anymore. Honestly, Jason, I can't agree with you. Your approach to hiring, by the way, is getting lots of questions in the Q&A. I'm going to try and ask one in a second. But I want to talk about the teaching. And I want to share with you a stat. Now, the association that I represent, the unified voice of CPAs and management accountants around the world, we produced a report earlier on this year with KPMG called Finance Transformation, the Human Perspective. And really the crux of the report was around, are we spending enough time on enabling people to be successful implementing the transformation initiatives that the company has set out? Because often the lion's share of investment is in either the process solutions, the technology, the consulting fees. But maybe people have forgotten to mention. And we polled over, 700 finance leaders from all around the world. Only 3% of them said that their people have the right balance of skills to allow that company that they represent to achieve their finance goals. Does that surprise you, Jason? And how do you go about addressing that at Robinhood?
Yeah, I'm not sure that it surprises me as much as it's a bit of a discouraging message. I tend to bias towards doing the work ourselves rather than just handing the big stretch projects to consultants. I think we can all agree there's a role for consultants, but I think the way that you use consultants should really be augmenting the thinking and augmenting the skills of the people that you have. People want to grow, and you ask them to do big things, and they'll go do it. And you might have to go hire someone that has a unique skill set to help you accomplish some stretch goal, but keep the learning inside the company. When you just outsource strategic thinking and you outsource the delivery of some big project, when the project's done, you get an output, but you lost all the learning and the know-how. And so, I'm not saying don't bring in the consultants, but I am saying make sure that your team has a meaty role to play, if not the leading role, where consultants augment rather than lead and ultimately deliver.
Absolutely.
And it's it's with that kind of mindset that I think, frankly, you can set yourself up to do even more as a team over time. And this point of view, I think, my friends at a variety of these consulting firms would probably say, yeah, Jason's a hard sell. And it's because I do have a bias that we can do it ourselves, and it may be harder in the short term, but it sets us up for great things later.
Yeah, and that's been a theme right throughout the last 40 minutes. I've got to quickly go back to hiring. I hope you don't mind, because we've got some questions here about hiring. I did say,
I feel like I touched a nerve on the hiring.
I did say a word. So I'm going to try and combine these two questions from Anne and Tokumbo here. So any additional lessons on hiring the right people in a large company versus a smaller company outside of just compensation? And yeah, Tokumbo, you're kind of asking the same question in a way. How would you assess if that perspective would be more applicable to a fast-growing company rather than a stable company? So yeah, any additional learnings in hiring the right people in large versus small outside of compensation?
Yeah, I do think it's relative. You know, at Amazon, during the 20 years that I was there, take the director level, for example. In the early years, a director could be leading a team of 10 to 15 people. In the later years, there were directors that had several thousand people reporting to them. And so, hiring big takes on a different definition depending on the environment. I joined, and as I mentioned, it was a team of 9 people. They were all accountants. Hiring big, I probably am not going to go hire someone that had 2,000 people reporting to them to lead my treasury team. But relative to kind of the business challenge that I saw today, but not just today, 2 to 6 years from now, I should hire somebody that can handle the treasury organization 6 years from now, not next month. Just doing the basic building of the team, but really looking ahead. And I do think that the advice of hiring really big depends on a couple of things. One, certainly, if it's a slow growth, incredibly stable environment, you'll create some problems, I think, in the dynamic, because you'll get people that are unsettled in the role that they're at because they're ready for the next challenge. So you have to be, you do have to be aware of that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so refreshing hearing you today, Jason, that long-term, that sustainable, that scalable philosophy. But I'm clock watching a bit, and you realize we've only got about 3 or 4 minutes left.
How's that, Bary?
Yeah, it's amazing how time has flown. So I think I'd like to go to our very final question just to round up. So perhaps you can summarize some of your key learnings and key perspectives here. And I'd ask you just to share with the audience before you leave for your very busy day, any words of wisdom on having a greater impact as a CFO, and some nuggets that these guys can take away with them today.
There's a couple of things that I would leave you with. One is people related. Would really encourage to fight the natural instinct of protecting your best people and preventing them from leaving into other parts of the organization. I personally benefited, and I've seen it replicated hundreds of times at Amazon, that when you create an environment that encourages rotation, particularly for your strongest people, rather than building, for example, a great accountant for the organization, you're going to build a great leader for the organization. And if you create an environment where your employees are afraid to come to you to ask for a rotation to another area, I think it does a disservice to the potential of your people and also of your company. And so would really encourage having that philosophy of allowing rotation. In terms of like greatest impact of the CFO, I would just reiterate that building the finance team and the processes around it is really table stakes. That to really add value as a finance org and as a CFO, you need to be relevant and present for the moments in time where the big strategic decisions are being made. And so if you find yourself as a CFO kind of enmassed in the daily functioning of your organization, then it would suggest that some of the things that I offered today around hiring bigger and allowing your team to operate without you in the room will free you up to be a bigger leader and have bigger impact for your company.
And I think that's a wonderful, wonderful quote to finish off with, having those people operate and lead as if you were not in the room. And I think that's really somewhere to, really to finish off very, very strongly, Jason. I'm just going to look at any final Q&A, if you don't mind.
Sure.
And just to see if anything else has come up, which it hasn't. So before our virtual attendees make their way around the virtual walkway to listen to Jill and to our friends from MIT on influence, it just leaves me on behalf of the association and the CGMA Finance Leadership Program to thank you, Jason. It's been an absolute pleasure spending the last 40 minutes with you. I'm going to hand back to Mary for any final words, if that's what I need to do. Thank you, everyone out there. Stay safe.
Thank you.